Live from Jacksonville, Florida, the Four Verticals podcast is about to start now.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to Four Verticals Podcast, episode 97. This is the pre-show, if you will. And by the way, nice intro there with the new announcer there. How about that? Got a pretty interesting show for you guys today. Of course, this is the pre-show. We'll probably start here in a minute or so to let folks come in. Of course, the notification from Twitter has been sent out, so everyone hopefully should know that we're live by now. That was sent out a little bit ago, of course. There will not be a show tomorrow because of issues tomorrow in terms of the schedule. We cannot do a show tomorrow, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can't do a show today. So in lieu of pre-recording something, I thought, why not just go live today? So, of course, we are high atop another steamy day here in Jacksonville, Florida. Rumor has it that will be a lot cool. Well, not a lot cooler, but somewhat cooler. Come later this week, although it will be going from 97 to 87, so you're not going to tell a difference if you will in the temperature. But yeah, I think we'll get started here in just a second properly for our folks on the audio version, or more or less on Spotify. But yeah, hopefully everyone's having a good day. Of course, a lot of news happening around the world. Of course, as a fan of atmospheric science, there were some really bad storms on Friday in Kentucky that night, Friday evening. I think around 24 people have lost their lives, very bad. And then yesterday, oh man, those storms in southern Kansas and the Central Plains yesterday were pretty bad. I was watching, Ryan Hall, Max Flossie, those guys yesterday on YouTube. Their streams, they do a very good job of covering the weather from a national scale, national scale, if you will. But there's more storms today. In fact, at the moment, as we are speaking, there is a tornado watch in effect for Central Plains. It's another moderate risk day, which is a level 4 out of 5 for like Oklahoma, Missouri, southeastern Kansas, northwestern Arkansas. So it's another rough day for you guys up there in Tulsa, Branson, Missouri, Fayetteville, Arkansas. Just it's gonna be a rough day. I think yesterday was rough to an extent, and tomorrow's gonna be rough again for the central southeastern U.S. So like Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, Mississippi. So it's gonna be another active day today, another active day tomorrow, and then thankfully this will be calming down for the next 7 days, and we'll have to deal with severe weather like this for a while. Hopefully this will be the last big event for a while. And of course, hurricane season is starting here soon. So I think with the pre-show, if there's anyone in the live chat, I'm looking here on my computer. I don't think there is. So we're going to get started here. So I'm going to get the audio stuff for the folks on Spotify. We are going to begin here in 3, 2, 1. Welcome in to Four Verticals Podcast, episode 97. Now, for the Spotify users and the YouTube users, I've already told you this, if you've ever heard it. We have a new intro. So if you go on to the YouTube side of things, we have a new intro, if you will, I guess. A new announcer, if you will, and some interesting back-end piano music, if you will. A nice soft tone, if you will, to bring us in. Got a big show for you guys today. ACC coaches under pressure. Georgia Tech record projection for 2025. Got some Marvel news, a little Q&A, albeit a bit dry. But yeah, again, if you're new here, we do this show typically on Tuesday and Thursdays. Now, again, because tomorrow's schedule is not ideal for a show, we can't do a show tomorrow. I was originally going to pre-record something, but then I decided why not just go live today. It's Monday. Of course, there's no rules of this show. We can basically go on air when we want to. But we usually have a schedule Tuesdays and Thursdays, not usually Mondays. So no show tomorrow. There will be a show on Thursday. So you'll be fine. Now, I will probably post this, probably have this scheduled to come out tomorrow, the audio version. So if you're listening to this live on YouTube, you'll get it first, and then the audio version will be out tomorrow. So, in lieu of us having a show tomorrow, I guess for Spotify users, even though it's not live for you guys, I'm just saying this for if you're interested in if you're listening to this on Spotify and on YouTube as well. So again, as usual, make sure you subscribe to the podcast feed, YouTube, like the streams, follow me on Twitter. You guys should know the drill. It's the usual boilerplate type stuff. So I think of everything that I just mentioned out of the way, let's kind of get into this. Again, I think we have a good show. I don't necessarily believe this will be a big show, but, it is, May 19th. We're high atop Jacksonville, Florida. It's, the holiday coming up of Memorial Day. We'll see. We'll see if we'll go for an hour or not. But, again, make sure to subscribe, like the streams, why not? Helps us out in terms of getting us an algorithm. We're not the newest show, but we're not the oldest show. We're definitely the newest show around here. We're getting close to 100 episodes. I believe we'll be hitting that next week. So very excited about that. Anyway, so ACC coaches under pressure. We did this last week with SEC coaches. Again, it's not necessarily job security, though in some cases it is, in some situations, but mostly it's not necessarily job security. It's more just the typical competitive pressure type stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get fired or anything. So ACC coaches under pressure, got 3 here. Some 3 of these names are probably obvious, but figured I'll talk about them to a certain extent. First one up here is Brent Pry, Virginia Tech. I will be honest, much like some of you in the college football media sphere, I was a little bit higher on Brent Pry last year in Virginia Tech. Now, some of this was because of their schedule, but they had come back, Kyron Drones. Another year, they improved. The one total from 2023 to last year, 2024, from 2022 to 2023. And my thinking was last year was based on their schedule, what they had coming back. I felt like Virginia Tech was going to take a massive step last year. It wasn't just me saying that, it was other folks saying that too. And it didn't happen. They fell spectacularly. Week 1, losing to Vanderbilt. And things kind of went off the rails pretty quickly, and they got people in the transfer portal. A lot of nervousness, if you will, in Blacksburg right now. Even though they just had the Metallica concert, but a couple weeks ago. But besides that, it's not been a good spring for them. And the seasonal outlook does not look good for them. I haven't checked their over-under win total from FanDuel yet. I guess we could do it now. Of course, we'll eventually do a proper win projection. The over-under win total is 6.5. So I guess somewhat bullish, but not really. But given it's Virginia Tech, right? The history there with Frank Beamer. I've got his son's coaching right now, South Carolina. I just forgot the first name for a second there, but Frank Beamer has history there. A program that used to be the model of stability in the ACC. Ever since he left in the beginnings of the regime after him, I forget the coach's name. It was the guy from Memphis that came over to Blacksburg, but things didn't really go all that well after that. After the first year, then you bring in Brent Pry, and it got off to a rough start. Good second year, and then last year sort of backed off a little bit. Now, of course, with all the situation in the portal, you can look at the list. All the players they lost, it's a big list. All those guys too are going to SEC schools, but it's just I had concerns about Brent Pry when he was hired the year before last year. Sort of cool things a little bit. Last year, sort of, reinforced or brought back some of those worries. Now, look, they could easily, and I guess pull up their schedule if I really wanted to. I guess we could do that. I haven't looked at it that much, but I do know it's. I believe they do play Vanderbilt again. Well, here just do some research on the show here. We'll usually do this. Let's see here, Virginia Tech football 2025. I believe they do play Vanderbilt again. Yes, they do, and they play South Carolina on the neutral site in Atlanta. That's the Sunday game. So it's a pretty tough start. They can easily start 0-2, which is kind of worrisome. Then they get your G5 with Old Dominion, or a little bit of rivalry there, in-state rivalry. Then you get your FCS team, and then you have NC State, Wake Forest, Georgia Tech, we will talk about here later. Cal at home, so don't travel to the East Coast. Going from East Coast to the West Coast, but then it gets real in a hurry with Louisville, Florida State, Miami, then Virginia. So it's not the worst schedule in the world. I guess in between September 13th until October 11th. But it gets real in a hurry. It really does. I mean, you start out with two SEC teams. I don't know why they scheduled both of those, given where their program's at. But you have brand new defensive coordinator, brand new OC. Brent Pry again. He's been improving every single year he's been there up until last year. They were again 3-8 that the game canceled. 3-8, 7-6, and then 6-7 last year. In a year where they had a very manageable schedule. And again, a year where I sort of bought into the hype with, Kyron Jones coming back, and, it seemed like there was a collective, I don't know what you call it, collective enthusiasm, if you will, about the program for the first time in a long time since the Justin Fuente era. Yeah, that's what I was thinking of earlier. But it's just not, I don't know, just the Virginia Tech I grew up with in the, late 2000s, early 2010s, it's not the same anymore. Again, besides Fuente's first year when they had that transfer quarterback come in, they go to the ACC championship game, and they lose. Everything has gotten worse since then. It's not been the same. And it's a program that I think should be doing a lot better. It's a coach, and Brent Pry, Brent Pry, the person I like based on what I've seen from him in interviews with Josh Pate a number of times, I believe now. Seems like a nice guy. Seems like someone who's, would be cool to talk to, but his, the fact that they hired him away from Penn State, and yes, he was good at Penn State as the DC, but I don't know, just first-time head coach at a program that wants to see improvement and, would like to have success like they did a long time ago. It's tough. And it sucks that this year could be pretty bad for them. But then again, like I mentioned earlier, I had my reservations around this hire when it was made. It's sort of been a little bit slightly better than I thought it was going to be. I thought he was going to be out in 2 years. I just did not like the hire to begin with. I warmed up to it again after 2023 season, but after last year, I'm back to I don't know what to think of this right now. So now for his, I guess for his sake, you better win this year because again, your schedule for what they have talent-wise and talent-wise, what they lost. This is a tough schedule. And there's no doubt in my mind. This is a tough schedule. There's a lot of teams on here like South Carolina, even Vanderbilt, NC State, Georgia Tech, Louisville, Florida State, Miami. Those are teams that are better than you. Now you have teams that you're either equal in talent or a little bit better than, like Wake Forest, Cal, Virginia. So there's some games you can win in there, but the expectation for Virginia Tech is not to just make a bowl game. I think the fans there would want to go, a little bit higher up in the win total. But again, given, playoff expansion and conference expansion, what is reasonable? What is I guess a reasonable expectation given all those things, and given that this schedule here is pretty tough. Unfortunately, your non-con is not necessarily easy. It's 50-50. You have two games, and then you have two games that are relatively easy, and then you have two games that are going to be challenges for you, and you're probably going to be dogs in both of them, I'd imagine, at least in one of them. But we'll see. Again, with Brent Pry, again, I had reservations about him. When I heard from him, he's obviously not stupid, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't have the job. But still concerned about him, and this is going to be a very tough year for them, given what they lost in the portal. I mean, they lost 20 guys or so to the portal, and a lot of them were starters and who have been plucked away from other teams in Southeastern regions. So we'll see. Up next here is Mike Norvell, a coach we talked about a lot on here. Last year going 2-10, not necessarily on the menu for a lot of Florida State fans. It's not to say he should have been fired last year. I don't think he should have. I think it is reasonable to give him every year. He brings in a new staff, brings in an OC who, whatever you have your own opinions on, I have my own. You can think of him however you want. I think the Tony White hire is a fun hire, but then again, the talent level at Florida State is not the same at Nebraska right now. You're going to a worse roster. So there is urgency to win. I think the two coordinator hires are clearly signs of we need to win now and at least make a bowl game. I think Norvell's probably safe if they go 7-5. Better. I think 6-6, probably 50-50, but I'm sure only some job security pressure here. There's also a lot of pressure just to win now because, Florida still is somewhat down. Miami, vulnerable to a certain extent, but they are on the rise. So, UCF, we'll see what happens with Scott Frost second time around. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure of Norvell. I'm not saying this guy, for come to end of the year and they go 2-10 again. Yeah, of course he's probably going to get fired. And along with him and Micah Alford, the AD there. I mean, there's no doubt that those two are going to be gone if this goes south. But I just have a hard time believing that this is going to end badly for them. I think Norvell knows it. He understands that this is, it's getting real for him. And a place like Florida State with a lot of history and what they've done, a couple years ago, going 10-3 and 13-1 a couple years ago. I think he has shown that you can win there, and he has the ability to win there, especially with using the portal. But then again, the portal is not necessarily the end-all be-all, much like, the reverse coin to that is Dabo Swinney, who didn't use it for a long time. Norvell and his staff there, they've admitted it. They have not done well recruiting in high school. Bud Elliott has talked about it multiple times on Nolecast and on Cover 3 that, Norvell and his staff, recruiting-wise in the ACC in terms of high school recruiting, has been woeful. It's been bad. So a lot of things to consider there with Norvell. I think he's fine, but there's certainly some pressure there and a lot of urgency to win this year, at least make it to a bowl game. And I think that's fair. That is a fair criticism. Mario Cristobal at Miami is a little bit different because they are starting to grow. It's that, they're starting to trend up, right? First year was awful. Second year, better. Last year was good, though some opportunities that were wasted to have a great season, at least defensively. And they make changes defensively. Shannon Dawson's back again. You have Carson Beck, who should be ready to go by fall camp and hopefully for week 1 against Notre Dame. But I think the pressure of Mario is not so much to get fired, is just sort of the same type of pressure that Jimbo Fisher was facing for a long time before it became job security, and what Kirby Smart was facing, and what Ryan Day was facing for a long time, was just that you need to get over the hump, right? Get over the next obstacle to, show why we brought you in, which is to get to the playoff and win a national championship. And I think for Mario Cristobal, he understands that the recruiting still pretty well. They just got the number one, offensive tackle last week, I believe, and they were here in Jacksonville for ACC Media Day. So doing well in recruiting. Yes, results on the field have not been that great, but they are getting better. And again, this season's schedule, when we'll eventually do their breakdown of it. But it's really interesting. I think this was either Danny Cannell or Tom Fornelli. It was one of the two on Cover 3. Brought up a really interesting scenario of, this year could go south. It could, right? You lose a lot of veteran guys. You lose Cam Ward, bringing Carson back. He's not as talented as Cam Ward. There's also the off-the-field issues with him. The girlfriend and stuff. You lose that leadership glue that was holding things together last year. You bring in a new DC. That takes some time to get, acclimated and stuff. It could be a rough year for them this year, and I don't think Mario's going to get fired, but that certainly makes 2026 a little more urgent. But I don't necessarily believe this is a non-disaster proof team, meaning that this could very easily go off the rails for them, like Florida State last year. I'm not predicting that. I don't think it'll be getting that bad, but there's a scenario where they could drop off slightly, going from 10-2 regular season to like 8-5, 8-4, 7-5. It's not impossible to think that, but I don't necessarily think it'll be going down to like the non-eligible realm. I think they're safe in that department. I think they'll be okay in that, at least in that realm. I don't think they're going to be like hemorrhaging for a bowl game appearance. So, those are coaches under pressure. And I could put more on here, like Pat Narduzzi. This is the first timer in Bill Belichick. Well, first year at UNC, but a lot of those names I consider the Belichick one. He literally just got there, so unless you're using the Jordan Hudson situation as reason to get him in trouble, I don't know about that. But those are 3 guys I listed under pressure. Of course, we'll do this for. I think we'll do it for the Big 12 next week, and then we'll move on to Big 10 after that. But not next week. The next show will be on Thursday. So, Brent Prime, Mike Norvell, Mario Cristobal. I think that's fine. I mean, I guess if you wanted to put Brent Keon here, sure, but I think he's safe regardless because I think he's doing a good job regardless at Georgia Tech, given expectations there. So, that's ACC coaches under pressure. I'm going to get some water real quick, and then I'm actually going to move my fan over because it's not in the right position where I'm sitting. So in my, I guess, quasi-studio apartment room. So I'm going to do that. Nothing's going to happen. Like, the show's not ending or anything. So if you're wondering why the audio cuts out, that's why. So okay, now that should be blowing this direction. Of course, since it is, we do the show from Florida, that it can get pretty hot around this time of the year. So there's nothing wrong with having some air being blown in. Well, it just looks like the audio for folks on Spotify cut out. Not sure what happened here. How about that? Did not expect that to happen. That is weird. So I guess what I'm going to do here, since we have a plan, I am going to. This is something for YouTube. You guys on YouTube, you guys are fine. Unfortunately, the Spotify folks are going to get a weird situation here. So I'm going to have to upload part 1 and part 2, I guess, for this episode on Spotify. So no big deal. That's fine. I just have to make sure to number all of these. So before I do that, I should probably do this episode 97, part 1. Yeah, apologies, guys. Here I did not expect to have the microphone disconnect there, but that's okay. I guess in worst case scenario, we could also upload an audio version of this too. So I guess there's always actually, now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, I may just have to do that. I may just do it that way. So yeah, I think we're just gonna find a way to upload the audio from this, and I guess we'll just put it on there. So anyway, folks on Spotify, yeah, so the audio on my actual microphone just kind of cut out there. So apologies for that. But on YouTube, yeah, let's go and continue. So Hugh Freeze, figured I'd put this in here real quick. Hugh Freeze spoke to the folks over at the Next Round Live in Birmingham, Jim Dunaway, Ryan Brown, and all those guys, Lance Taylor and all of them. So they were at some sort of an event in Birmingham, I believe, and all the coaches in the state of Alabama, I believe, were there. It was like some golf tournament thing, speaking engagement. So they had Hugh Freeze on the show, and I listened to their show every single day. And as they did that last week, I believe it was on Friday or sometime last week. I don't remember off the top of my head, but so they speak to Hugh Freeze, and he talks about Auburn 2025. And one of the, not an exact quote here, by the way, but one of the things that Hugh Freeze mentioned on when they were talking to Next Round to the guys over at Next Round Live, and they brought up, he sort of brings up, the expectations for Auburn and sort of the idea of them, just making it to a bowl game, right? That's sort of what he said. The essence of, we know what's at stake here. Last year was what it was. We had a lot of games we lost. We were, several plays away from making it to a bowl game. And I think he sort of, and I think a lot of folks got this confused, that the baseline, I think what Hugh Freeze is trying to say is that the baseline for this year is to make a bowl game, right? Because they didn't do that last year. But of course, it's not the expectation on Auburn. The expectation on Auburn is to win that championship. And Hugh Freeze knows that, and Auburn knows that, and clearly they know that. And I think what Hugh Freeze was trying to say is that is the baseline, right? Just make a bowl game, and then whatever happens and follows after that. And of course, that's why God invented spring and fall camp to get players acclimated, especially the freshmen, and prepare on stuff and whatnot, and game plan and things like that. And I think for Hugh Freeze, that's understandable, right? I think he understands what he walked into, after Brian Harsin was fired. And Josh Lee talks about this all the time. It's the entry point, right? It's the entry point when you enter in, to a college football program, right? When you first get hired and whatnot, it's all about when you enter in, right? What's the talent level like? What's the coaching staff like? Not necessarily the guys you'll be bringing in, but the folks who are already there, right? Your recruiters, your PR people, and stuff like that. Nutritionists, strength and conditioning. What does that look like, right? And when Brian Harsin got fired, Hugh Freeze comes in. The roster was a disaster. The staff was not necessarily the best, though it wasn't totally bad organizationally, much like Bill Napier's in with Florida right now. So Hugh Freeze comes in. The roster was a complete mess. He knew that. First year was portal heavy. That's why they got Peyton Thorne and a lot of those other players, albeit not all of them didn't pan out, but they were highly rated portal guys, mostly from the G5 at receiver. So he does that. He mainly focuses on, recruiting high school, right? Like I mentioned earlier with Norvell and his team, in his group, where yes, they do well. They have done well in the portal, and it's not a guarantee, but they have not done well in high school. Auburn and Hugh Freeze have sort of a bit of a better mixture of that, right? It's use the portal, gets good pieces to sort of fill positions that were not filled correctly via recruiting for some reason, and then use recruiting as your main pipeline of talent. And they've done that for the most part, right? They got Cam Coleman, not Louis Riddick, that's the NFL college football analyst at ESPN, but DeMarcus Riddick, and I'm related to Louis Riddick, but DeMarcus Riddick, Perry Thompson, a lot of other key players that will be key facets for this year's team and going forward. That was sort of Hugh Freeze's role, was to bring in that talent and improve it. And while yes, the results on the field have not been good enough, and that's fair to say that, but it's understandable as to why, because they're not there yet. A lot of the players last year, like Cam Coleman and so on and so forth, those guys now are a year older this year, and I think the expectation is for Auburn is that there's hope that they can, at the very minimum, make a bowl game, but also do bigger things and set up perhaps next year for being sort of what Miami did last year. And, you're a quarterback away in terms of making the playoff and being a very good team, actually fielding a reasonable product for Auburn. So that's what Hugh Freeze is trying to say. I know we had him, it was ironic, where we had Hugh Freeze on the ACC coaches under pressure. And so it was interesting to have that conversation happening and us doing that topic. So just want to speak on that really quickly. But, yeah, so that's my thoughts on that whole spiel with Hugh Freeze in the next round. Again, if you haven't subscribed to them, you didn't know who they are. Yeah, so the Next Round Live, they're in Birmingham. They used to do radio, and they sort of moved on from that. They're on YouTube now. Just, the Next Round Live. Look them up, subscribe. They're not like friends of the program or anything like that. They're just, it's a show I listen to, and I think that's a show that you guys would like. If you're a big fan of college football or sports in general, give them a follow on YouTube. Subscribe. Team record projection 2025 version. Of course, we started this a couple weeks ago. Now it's May now. We have done so far on the team record projections. It's been we did Florida State, Texas, Washington, Oklahoma. We did USC on Thursday. Now we are doing Georgia Tech. Speaking of Brent Pride and Company, last year, great season for them. I know, they had the Florida State game, the Miami game. Would have been nice to beat Georgia, but in some ways, it's like that old saying, some things happen for a reason. Maybe that Georgia, if they win last year, maybe you go into this season knowing a lot more about Georgia Tech. But since they didn't beat Georgia last year in that insane game, I don't think a lot of folks are catching on to this. Like Georgia Tech, if I haven't looked at their schedule yet, it's a very manageable schedule. It's sort of like Syracuse's schedule last year and sort of like Louisville's schedule a couple years ago in the ACC, where it's very, very manageable. So how it breaks down, so they get Colorado on the road. That's the Thursday night ESPN game. FCS, then they get Clemson at home early. I'm just letting you guys know now, and a lot of folks, Josh Bates already touched on this already, but I'll just reiterate what he said. That could be the game of the year in the ACC. It really could. Again, you're getting Clemson at home early. Clemson at that point is coming off of the LSU game. So, win or loss, they're getting an LSU team that is, or a Clemson team that's probably going to be very, very vulnerable, I would say. And it's not a bad thing because regardless of what happens, right, if they lose or win, I feel like that is a good spot for them. It's early in the year. It's their first road game of the year. It's an ACC game. It's a rivalry game. I'm just letting you know right now that especially if that's a night game at Bobby Dodd Stadium, that could be a very, very interesting game for a lot of reasons. And I would imagine that line, I don't believe it's out yet at this point. I mean, we are in May. Could be a potential situation where Clemson might not be the favorite in that game, or they might, but it might be like a 1-point favorite or something like that. So that's a very dangerous game there for Clemson. But for Georgia Tech, that's an opportunity, right? So they get their G5 game, another G5 game, right? Well, now have one G5. Then their ACC schedule goes as follows: at Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, at Duke, Syracuse, NC State on the road, and Boston College on the road in Pittsburgh. Besides, I guess, Duke on the road, and I guess maybe NC State, that's a very winnable schedule. Like, after the Temple game until your last non-con, which is always Georgia, you could go for that stretch undefeated. There's a chance you could. There's a chance you could lose to like a Duke or a Virginia Tech maybe, or NC State, but there's a real chance you could get through that with only one loss. Even if you lose to Clemson, let's just say they, go 2-0 into that Clemson game, you lose, go for that stretch from Wake Forest to Pittsburgh, only have one loss. Go to that Georgia game, you're like what, 8-2, I believe, 9-2. That's not impossible to think. That is definitely on the table for Clemson, for Georgia Tech. I guess it could be on the table for Clemson too, but it's on the table for Georgia Tech and Brent Pry, and that would be a magical year for them. I mean, the last time they won 10 or more games, probably 10 years ago, I believe, 2014, when they beat Mississippi State in the bowl game, Orange Bowl. So, and of course, you get the Georgia game, and unfortunately, it's a neutral site, whatever. I hate it, but, because they are in Atlanta, I think there is actually a deal that Georgia Tech has where once a year they have a game at Mercedes-Benz, and unfortunately, it's Georgia this year. So, I get it. It's all for the money. I get it, whatever. But, in terms of that Georgia game, it's on a neutral site too, so I guess it's going to help a little bit. But then again, it sucks that there will be a large amount of Georgia fans there, I believe, I'd imagine. Because it's a neutral site, not at Bobby Dodd Stadium. But, again, that much like last year, you have an opportunity. So, based on that schedule, how I just read it to you guys, they're over on win total, by the way, at Vandal, who's a sponsor of the show. We just like using them. They have them 7.5 over on the win total. So their best case scenario, at least with me, again, how we do this, it's best case, worst case, and reasonable. Reasonable could be different or the same as best case or worst case, depending on how I believe your team is constructed and how your schedule is. And by the way, your team, largely the same. Now, of course, they lose Singleton, the receiver, to Auburn, but Haynes King is back, which is good. They have a new OC in DC, I believe. They have a new DC. It's Blake Gideon, who I believe was he was at Texas for Mac Brown. Very good player for them defensively. So the new DC, I'm not too concerned. Yes, it is a bit of a drop off, but you have Haynes King back. You have most of your offense back. Coordinators on offense stay the same. Defense, we'll see. But the fact you get Haynes King back, he wasn't the problem last year. And in fact, he was the part of your offense that was really good last year. Haynes, he didn't turn the ball over that much. He did previous year. Took care of the football, ran the football very well. Was a dual threat guy. You remember he was at A&M. He's a five-star kid out of high school. Comes in A&M. Injuries sort of derailed him from being very good. Comes to Georgia Tech, and under Brent Key, again, a guy who a lot of folks didn't think was going to get that job. Brent Key ends up getting the interim tag removed, and he's done wonders there. He's done a very good job there. So based on that, which you have coming back and your schedule being very manageable, I think an 11-1 situation here is not impossible. I know that sounds crazy for Georgia Tech, but there's a scenario where you only lose one game. You can choose one, right? Whether it's Clemson or Georgia. Probably the Georgia game more likely because it is a neutral site, not a technically home game, which sucks. But there's a world where Georgia Tech could go can only have one loss. 11-1. That's on the table here. Again, that's not crazy to think that. That's real here. It's not me being stupid or anything. I generally believe that. I believe with this schedule, the way it sets up, how manageable it is, sort of like, again, think Louisville a couple years ago, Syracuse last year in the ACC. This is that schedule, and with this rotation now, there's no more divisions. This could happen, much like Indiana last year. They randomly get a somewhat manageable schedule. That's Georgia Tech this year, so they could be. I'm not going to say that it's guaranteed they'll be this year's Indiana, but it's not impossible to think that. So best case scenario is 11-1. The worst case scenario is 7-5. So right now, if their win total, some of this, maybe we're overhyping Georgia Tech. Maybe we're, I'm sort of this is sort of this year's version of Virginia Tech last year, but I think 7-5. Even that's not. It sucks that you hasn't taken advantage of a workable schedule, but injuries, stuff like that, maybe some of these other teams in your schedule a little more difficult than we thought. Of course, going on the road to Colorado, nothing. Not trying to disrespect Deion Sanders and company, but that's a team that is in the best way I can say it, reloading, if you will. We'll see. But 7-5, even for Georgia Tech standards, that's pretty good. I think the most reasonable scenario here, if you take the worst case and the best case, clearly I believe they'll go to a bowl game, and I think they'll either be at or exceed the win total from FanDuel. I think 9-3 is on the cards here for reasonable. I went with 9-3. So, again, I think you lose to Georgia. You lose to a Duke or a Virginia Tech, and you lose to Clemson early in the year. I think 9-3 would be really good as well. So 11-1 best case, 7-5 worst case, reasonable 9-3. Again, I know it sounds like I'm on drugs. I know it sounds like I'm high on Georgia Tech, but I am, and for good reasons. I believe this is a team that a lot of folks right now aren't paying attention to. But then come preview magazine season, and once you get your hands on College Bowl 26, EA Sports College Bowl 26, and you see, man, that Georgia Tech's an 85 overall team. How'd that happen? Well, you should be listening to shows like me and Josh Pates, because I am very, 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 very excited for Georgia Tech this year. If I was betting, if I did do that, I would definitely bet the over on that 7-5 or that 7.5 win total for sure. Like that's to me, that schedule way it sets up, barring any major surprises with injuries and stuff like that, this could be a very, very magical year for Georgia Tech football. And that's a program, Josh Pate, I talked about before, even going back to his days independent in Columbus. I remember I was watching him back in 2019. He's always fun. I solely started to agree with him that Georgia Tech could, they just got the right hire right, and they, emphasized recruiting. They could be sort of like what Stanford was on the West Coast, back during the Pac-12 days, where they were, especially under David Shaw and Harbaugh, 11 wins, 10 wins, making it to Rose Bowls, on the cusp of the College Bowl playoff some years, and then before that the BCS. This could be Georgia Tech. They just got the hire right, and they just recruited really well. I guarantee you, if they go 11-1 and have a magical year, that place is going to be. This is going to be a program, more likely a program defining season for them, and the trajectory of that program is going to change. I guarantee it's going to change because, again, you're in Atlanta. It's the heart of the South, right? It's the crossroads of the South. Have Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport there. A lot of folks. It's a big tourist hub. It's a big place for business. See those tall buildings in the background. You have the stadium and the campus. A lot of opportunities for of course it's a academic institution, right? It's like Harvard of the South. But I don't know. I do agree with Josh Pete a little bit. At least over the years I've warmed up to it, that if Georgia Tech, if they just got the hire right, they just recruited really well, they could have a lot of success, and it'd be a very appealing place for a lot of people. Because Atlanta's not a bad place to live at. Granted, the traffic sucks, but you've been there a number of times living in the Southeast. That it just blows my mind how they've never, ever since the later good years of who was the coach there, Paul Johnson. Yeah, the latter half of the Paul Johnson years just blows my mind how they have not gotten head coach right. They could have hired a big name in Willie Fritz. He doesn't, and he stays at Tulane for another year. But Brent Key, again, he has the opportunity. It's there, much like Fran Brown last year, much like Jeff Brom at Louisville, and sort of like Coach Cignetti at Indiana in Big Ten. The schedule's there for them. It's just they have to take advantage of it. It's there. So, again, I don't want people coming to me in October or November saying, man, how's, Georgia Tech, 8-2 or, 9-1? Well, you should listen to this show and others. So, I'm just warning you now, don't be surprised if they are up there and potentially in the ACC championship game. Heck, they may even win the conference this year. May even win the league. I don't know if I'm going to go that bold yet, because we'll eventually do our conference, winter projections, if you will. But, yeah, Georgia Tech, best case 11-1, worst case 7-5, reasonable 9-3. So, feel fairly good about it. I'm going to get some water real quick, and then we'll move on to the last two Marvel topics, and we'll get into a quick Q&A, and we'll get out of here. Again, apologies. I guess if we end up using this audio for Spotify, but yeah, my microphone, I usually use it disconnected, and I was, the audio paused on the software I use, but then I guess I clicked the wrong button and just decided to start a new file. So in lieu of not doing a part 1 and part 2, we may just use this, or may not even have the audio version available. So I'll let you guys know on Twitter what we end up doing there, but I'll probably work on that a little bit later. But yeah, so a couple Marvel things here I want to touch on real quick. First one is X-Men casting news. You may have seen this floating around, making the rounds across the interwebs, if you will, as usually it does. But last week, I heard some rumblings. This started happening, of course, after I do my show. Some rumblings about, Charles Xavier casting rumors, Magneto casting rumors, potentially Denzel Washington as a Magneto. A couple other names for Charles as well. But then My Time to Shine Hello, somewhat from the program, they put on Twitter that they were hearing that Denzel Washington, of all people, was being he was being considered, but another high profile actor, maybe the greatest of all time, Daniel Day-Lewis, being considered for Magneto. Now, when I initially heard this, and much like the most of you, I probably looked at that much like the I looked at it like the rest of you guys, and I was like, Daniel Day-Lewis for Magneto, yeah, okay, sure, he's a good actor, but at first, my first opinion was, my first thought was, is he retired? And second of all, that's kind of a pie in the sky thought there. I thought they were going to go a little bit more different, cheaper, stuff like that, right? Sort of like the Fantastic Four. Because remember, for the Fantastic Four, we were hearing a lot of, big time rumors about, Adam Driver and Margot Robbie and other bigger names. And then Marvel eventually, in the words of Jeff Snyder, went cheaper. And cheaper is not a bad thing. It's more reasonable to bring in actors like, Pedro Pascal and Vanessa Kirby, because they're good actors, actresses and whatnot, but they're a lot more affordable, is what I think Jeff was trying to say when some of these rumors and stuff were coming around about X-Men the last few weeks on his show with him and John Roca. That again, it's not so much that they're bad actors and that's why they're cheap. It's just they're more affordable because they're not the bigger names, and Marvel would much prefer to spend all their budget on big name actors, and much rather keep it cheaper, make it to where these guys can appear in multiple movies, and so that it's not ballooning the budget. But so hearing Daniel Day-Lewis, I'm just like, that's not Marvel. That's not what I would imagine Marvel doing, at least now, right? In the world of inflation and stuff like that, and actors costing more and more money now, that doesn't make any sense. Not to mention, too, he's retired. Then I started thinking about it, and other sources, if you will, on Twitter started saying, hey, even though this may seem crazy, what that account is saying, that's not necessarily crazy. We're hearing the same thing, that they're going for this caliber of actor, which is, again, it's very rare for Marvel. Like, the only other actor, like big name actor that they've had on the roster, at least I guess to a large sample size, right? I mean, like Harrison Ford got there 2 seconds ago with Captain America: Brave New World. Besides that, the only other big actor that was big before they got to Marvel, not when they got there and after, was Anthony Hopkins. He was in the Hannibal Lecter movies, right? I mean, that's pretty big, right? I mean, he's one of the bigger actors that Marvel, the MCU, has had so far. Big movie stars. So that, besides that, they have not gotten this direction. And I think going this direction with bringing in Daniel Day-Lewis, if he hadn't watched any of his movies, he's been in a lot of movies. If I were to recommend one, his Abraham Lincoln movie that Steven Spielberg directed back 10 years ago. Watch, that's an amazing movie. Yeah, so he's being eyed for Magneto. So it makes sense if you know his background. He's a Jewish man. I believe his parents are from Germany too, so there is some connection there, which would make sense. But then again, it's not what Marvel typically does. But man, if they're going this big for for Magneto, bringing in one of the greatest actors to ever live, it makes you wonder who they're going to put in with Charles, right? So that sort of segues into this news, which came out this weekend. I believe was Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, Walter White being Charles Xavier. Okay, don't know if I see that, but just those names you're starting to hear now is like, bringing in someone like Daniel Day-Lewis, you may as well bring in an actor that's similar caliber. So what's weird for me, because for the longest time, knowing that eventually we would get a new, X-Men cast, I've always thought, to me, and I don't know if this is crazy or not, but I always thought that a very interesting choice for Charles, they're going to go a younger route, not necessarily going the Patrick Stewart route, which is like 80 plus years old, like going like that age. Of course, a lot of those original X-Men actors are coming back for, Secret Wars and Doomsday because multiverse stuff. But in terms of the new cast after the reboot or the soft reboot, I thought a actor for Charles Xavier, which I thought would have fit, would be Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan, from the prequels. I thought that would be a good match, right? Sort of at that young at that age. It's not too old, it's not too young, sort of in that middle age, if you will. Now, of course, nationality is not the same as Patrick Stewart because Patrick Stewart's from, from the UK, I believe. Ewan's from Scotland, so it's not the same, but it could work. I don't see why not, right? He's already in with Disney and with Star Wars, so I could, maybe they go that route if they don't get, if they don't go the, more expensive A-lister route with Daniel Day-Lewis, and maybe they do go a different route with Charles, a more high-profile actor. But this news came out recently. It's interesting. It's cool now that we actually are getting this casting news. But then again, like I mentioned with Fantastic Four, we saw this a little bit, I guess, caution here. Similar to that, right? We were hearing big names initially. Then we started to realize, they went big first. They were running more money. All right, we'll go cheaper, which means we'll get, we can sign you guys to big contracts, which is probably the same too. But for us of the X-Men cast, are probably going to go younger for a lot of the other heroes like, Cyclops, Rogue, Jean Grey, all of those characters. Probably going to go more younger because, again, they want these actors to be appearing in a lot of movies and don't want to spend that much money on, high-profile people. So cool that we're getting these rumors. Again, these will not be these versions of these characters will not be appearing like in like Doomsday and Secret Wars. I think they'll spend time to wrap up the OG X-Men from the Fox, not the first class group. It's the ones before, I guess the ones that were also in Days of Future Past. It's that crew that they're going to wrap up, move on, and then they'll bring in the new actors. So it's cool we're getting these news, this news, or at least not news, but like this being leaked. So it kind of shows you the times that we're living in. But another thing I wanted to touch on is these new rumors, and this is coming from an account that they're somewhat new. They've not been on Twitter for that long, but it's the guy's name is James McCall, I believe. I don't know. Again, his bio claims he had an old account. It got deleted for some reason. He claims is for leaking stuff, I guess. But this account has popped up, and they've gotten some things right, apparently. But they are they've been leaking out a lot of interesting stuff here, and a lot of this is sort of, not to go over everything they've been talking about, but they've been sort of mentioning, mostly like Battle World movies and stuff. And that's been the concept that's been around for, a long time from people like Alex Perez, and I believe, Josh over at Den of Nerds is mentioning it, and I was listening to the stream earlier, and he, reminded everyone that, he's been mentioning the Battle World movies too, right? There's been a lot of rumors about like a World War Hulk movie, Doctor Strange 3, movies like that. So now you have this guy, James McCall, whatever his name is, this new scooper starting to tweet out stuff this weekend saying, hey, there's Doctor Strange 3 that's coming out, Thor 5, World War Hulk, that Marvel supposedly during, San Diego Comic-Con this July, they're going to have this, new announcements, saying, hey, we're revealing the next phases of Marvel. So actually, before I continue on here, I need to answer this text here. Of course, whoever is doing this, they should know I'm streaming right now, but that's okay. I'll like that. I'll handle that in a second. Nothing that important. But yeah, they're mentioning stuff about, this new World War Hulk movie, Thor 5, things like that. And like some of this sounds kind of corny. Like, for example, like the Doctor Strange 3 is being called like this is the title here, In the Incursions of Insanity, which sounds like a mouthful. Hopefully that's not the real title. Thor 1, though, sounds kind of cool. At least the working title. It's like Thor Hammerfall or something like that. And you have World War Hulk. So, well, again, the validity, the validity of this, can't say it's real or not. But the fact that this is sort of consistent with what we have been hearing from people like Alex Perez and Joshua of Den of Nerds, that this is consistent. We don't know for sure. Look, could they definitely announce this like the rest of the cast of Doomsday during Comic-Con? Absolutely, right? They have to, Marvel has to announce something, right? They can't just show up and be like, oh, yeah, we'll show you some, concept art of, Doomsday, and we'll show you some set photos and stuff like that. That would be enough. It was sure that'd be cool and stuff, but, of course, that's the next big movie that's coming out. But that doesn't, to me, seem like enough. It seemed like to me they would have to go a lot bigger with their announcements, and I believe some of that would be, them doing, announcing the rest of Phase 6 and doing these Battle World movies that will be taking place on Battle World, which will, of course, if you don't know, this happens after, in Secret Wars in the comics where Doctor Doom, reshapes the whole multiverse, it makes it into one universe, and it's a mixture of different universes and all this other stuff. And you have different, sort of like a medieval style, because, he's from Latveria and stuff, and it's, based on, kingdoms and realms of like certain groups of characters or variants of characters. So, like I say, this has been rumored for a long time. This idea of Battle World movies and like a Battle World saga, if you will, and like splitting or doing another Avengers film, sort of wrapping up all this and sort of actually using the multiverse properly instead of just teasing it out. And again, we don't know for sure, right? This could be just a bunch of BS, and it is just Spider-Man Brand New Day takes place in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, and Secret Wars wraps it up and they move on. But it's also not out of the realm possibility either that we do get a Doctor Strange 3 and a Thor 5 in Battle World, and we get some really cool stuff, right? With like other, variants of Thor, maybe like Beta Ray Bill and stuff like that. So, look, again, like I said, this could be crap. Comic-Con's in 2 months or so. We could get to that, and it turns out to be much of nothing. This guy was full of shit. But as of right now, we don't know for sure. We'll just say, look, it's a possibility. Other scoopers have been talking about, World War Hulk and Thor 5 and stuff like that, and multiverse-based, Battle World movies. So, again, it's not out of the realm possibility. I'm just saying we don't know for sure. So, just putting it out there. But if this is the case, this is pretty cool. I will admit, pretty cool. This is true. So, and again, do some Q&A here pretty quickly, then we'll wrap up. First question here: when will we get the College Football 26 trailer from EA Sports? So, EA, during their, I guess, like somewhat teaser, if you will, it was sort of teasing both Madden and college football for the draft, right? We got very, very little details about it. Of course, you got like the cover leak a few months ago during the photo thing at the Rules Bowl with the coaches and players and stuff and the mascots. And of course, EA mentioned that they were going to reveal more in, May. Right now, it's about to be Memorial Day this time next week, right? So we're kind of running out of time. I would imagine if we were going to get a trailer or something or some sort of announcement, like cover reveal and stuff like that, much like last year, I would imagine that that's probably coming this week because it is Memorial Day weekend. I think they would want us to, be talking about it over the holiday weekend. I think it'll be pretty cool to like news dump. Well, not like news dump, but like drop something on that Friday and have it go into the weekend and segue into the weekend and everyone talks about it. So my guess, I think this weekend, I think with the holiday coming up, it being a long weekend, I think EA would want to take an advantage of having that be a talking point going into this weekend as we sort of go on, get ready for the holiday here in the U.S. That I would not be surprised if they do that. So I believe we're getting a trailer this week at some point, either both in the cover reveal and more details and stuff like that, like a a gameplay, well, not a gameplay trailer, but like it will be a gameplay trailer, and then we'll maybe get like that article drop and gives you more details on like new things you're adding in and stuff like that. So, College Football 26 content, that's probably coming this week. On Friday, I think we'll probably get the trailer if it is this week, probably Friday. Thursday, probably the cover reveal, and of course we'll cover all that on the Thursday show if it does happen. But again, it's no insider sourcing here. I have no one from EA telling me this. But again, if I had to guess, if it is this week, I think trailer Friday, leading into the weekend, holiday weekend. Then the day before, we'll probably get the cover reveal, probably. So, or before that. Last question, and we'll wrap up. Is the Young Avengers project still happening? Yes, I believe this is still happening. Now, of course, it's not the thinking here. It's not going to be called Young Avengers because a lot of these actors and actresses, right, are not young anymore. Like, for example, Haley Steinfeld, Kate Bishop. She's literally getting married to Josh Allen, the quarterback of the Buffalo Bills. Like she's getting married to him. She's going to be starting a family. So it's like these aren't necessarily young kids anymore, right? So it's like calling Young Avengers doesn't make any sense. So the working, not rumor, just what's being put out there for all these leakers and scoopers right now. It says it's not going to be called Young Avengers because of the age situation. It's more likely going to be called Champions, which is a name from the comics, I believe. So it's not something new, I think. I'll have to double check that. I guess I should have, but it's not going to be called Young Avengers. But that project's still happening. Sort of like the Nova thing, which has been around for like a long time. That's like supposedly still happening, even though they've been saying that for like 10 years now. So we'll see on that. But yeah, I think Young Avengers is probably still happening, even though it won't be probably called that because again, a lot of these actors and actresses are aging up like beyond. Again, most of these are like I just said, like Haley Steinfeld should be married to Josh Allen, the Bills quarterback here soon. So yeah, that's it for the show. A little more of a shorter show, if you will. Again, apologies to the Spotify viewers. Unfortunately, the audio from this will have to be what you're going to hear, I guess, because the traditional way I do the audio isn't working. So we'll probably get this out on Spotify. Hopefully tomorrow we'll get it figured out. So we'll see. But at the moment, there's no audio right now from Spotify, but hopefully there will be. We'll just have to do it the old-fashioned way. But yeah, so until Thursday, again, no show tomorrow. If you're listening to this on the replay or I guess right now, reminder, no show tomorrow. We will have a traditional show on Thursday, usual time, I guess, around this time. So until then, take care. Have a good rest of your Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. So until then, take care, and we'll see you then.